The lawyer's call came one rainy Thursday morning as I sat in my tiny Boston apartment, stirring instant coffee before heading to my shift at the bookstore. I almost let it ring out. Unknown numbers usually meant scammers or creditors, and I had enough worries already. But something compelled me to answer on the fourth ring. "Is this Clara Bennett?" the voice asked, polite but businesslike. "Yes, speaking," I replied cautiously. "Ms. Bennett, this is Rachel Connor from Connor and Fields Attorneys at Law. I'm calling regarding the estate of Elizabeth Harrington. I believe she was your grandmother?" My spoon slipped from my fingers and clattered against the mug. Gran Elizabeth had passed away 8 months ago, and I hadn't been allowed to attend the funeral. My father, Richard Bennett, and his wife Lorna had made it clear I wasn't welcome. "Yes," I said slowly. "She was my grandmother." "I need to arrange a meeting with you as soon as possible," Rachel continued. "There are matters related to her will that require your urgent attention." "There must be some mistake," I blurted out. "My dad told me I wasn't part of her will. He said she left everything to him and my half-sister." A brief silence hummed on the other end of the line. "Ms. Bennett, I believe it's essential we meet in person. Are you free this afternoon?" 3 hours later, I sat in a leather armchair in Rachel Connor's office near Back Bay, staring at documents I could barely process. According to the files in front of me, my grandmother had left me $2 million, 0 cents, her townhouse in Beacon Hill, and multiple investment accounts. "This can't be right," I stammered for the third time. "My dad always said I was adopted. He claimed Gran Elizabeth wasn't my real grandmother and had no reason to leave me anything." Rachel Connor, a woman in her late 50s with a gentle face framed by dark curls, gazed at me with quiet sympathy. "It's Mammy. Your grandmother left very specific instructions. She asked me to give you this letter personally." She handed me an envelope, my name written in Gran Elizabeth's neat looping script. My fingers trembled as I opened it. "My dearest Clara, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and Rachel has finally managed to reach you. I've tried to see you these past 3 years, but your father and Lorna made it impossible. You deserve the truth, because the lies they told were cruel and unfounded. You are not adopted. You are my biological granddaughter, the daughter of my beloved Sophie. Sophie was your father Richard's first wife, and she died in a car accident when you were 3 years old. Richard remarried Lorna 8 months later, and Lorna never wanted to accept that you existed. She pressured Richard to give you up for adoption so they could start over with children of their own. To his shame, Richard agreed to go along with it. But I fought for you, Clara. I threatened to take them to court for custody. I told them I'd expose what they were trying to do to the entire family and the community. They kept you only because I forced them to. Lorna has resented you ever since. She's the one who planted the idea that you were adopted, who convinced Richard to treat you differently than Tessa and Ethan. Every harsh word, every time they shut you out, every moment they made you feel like you didn't belong, that was Lorna's doing, and Richard's weakness for allowing it. I tried so hard to stay close to you, but Lorna made it nearly impossible. She'd cancel our visits at the last minute, block my calls, and eventually they moved you all the way to Worcester just to keep you away from me. The last time I saw you, you were 16. I've missed out on nearly 7 years of your life because of them. I'm leaving everything to you, Clara, not only because you're my granddaughter, but because you're the only one in this family who's carried your burdens with grace. I know about the university classes, the part-time jobs, the tiny studio apartment you're barely affording in Boston. I know because I hired a private investigator to keep me informed when your father and Lorna shut me out. I also know that Richard and Lorna have been telling everyone my estate would be divided equally among all the grandchildren. They've been spending money they don't even have, counting on an inheritance that isn't coming. They're in for quite a shock. I hope this money lets you build the life you truly want. But more than that, I hope this letter finally gives you the truth you always deserved. You are loved. You are wanted. You always have been. All my love. Elizabeth Harrington. P.S. The keys to the Beacon Hill townhouse are in the safe deposit box. I hope you'll consider living there. It's been waiting for you. I read the letter 3 times before the words sank in. Not adopted. My mother, my real mother, had died when I was 3. Lorna wasn't my mother at all. She was simply the woman who married my father and spent the next 20 years making me feel like a stranger in my own family. Rachel spoke gently. The private investigator documented a great deal about your life, Clara. Your grandmother cared deeply about how you were treated. She passed me another folder. Inside were photos and reports from recent years. Pictures of me walking to work, sitting in my tiny studio apartment, buying cheap groceries. My grandmother had been watching over me from afar, caring for me in ways my own father never bothered to. What did my father and Lorna think they were going to inherit? I asked. Rachel gave a dry smile. Your grandmother led them to believe they'd received the majority of her estate. She encouraged that belief. She wanted them to keep spending money they didn't have, convinced they'd pay it back with the inheritance. How much did they spend? I asked, my voice tightening. Quite a lot, from what Elizabeth told me and from the investigators' reports, Rachel said. Your father bought a brand new Jaguar last year, nearly $60,000. 0 cents. Lorna redid the entire kitchen in their house in Newton, $35,000, 0 cents. And your half-sister Tessa got a designer wardrobe and a summer trip to Santorini for her birthday, another $20,000, 0 cents. They'd been living far beyond their means. I thought about my own life during that same time, working long shifts at the bookshop, attending university classes on my breaks, living off toast and tea in a tiny studio apartment. While my family spent money they hadn't yet inherited, I was scraping by just to afford basic necessities. So, what exactly did they end up inheriting? I asked. Rachel rifled through the papers in her folder. Each of your half-siblings received $4,000, 0 cents. And my father and Lorna? Nothing, Rachel said firmly. Absolutely nothing. My head spun. Nothing, Rachel continued softly. Your grandmother made it very clear that Richard forfeited any right to inherit when he chose Lorna's wishes over protecting his own daughter. I sat back in the leather chair, struggling to absorb it all. Nearly $2 million, 0 cents. A Beacon Hill townhouse, and, most importantly, the truth about who I really was and why I had been cast aside. There's one more thing, Rachel added gently. Your grandmother wanted me to be present when you inform your family about the inheritance. She wanted a witness to their reaction. And that's how I found myself taking a train to Newton the next evening. Rachel beside me, and a cashier's check for $2 million, 0 cents, folded inside my coat pocket. I hadn't set foot in my father's house for over a year, not since he'd told me I was too old to keep asking for handouts, when I'd pleaded for help paying my university fees. From the outside, the house looked exactly as I remembered, suburban, well-maintained, with that shiny Jaguar parked on the drive and perfectly clipped hedges framing the walkway. Lorna opened the door, her face immediately hardening at the sight of me. Clara, what are you doing here? We need to talk, I said. All of us. It's about Gran Elizabeth's will. Her expression flickered to something sharp and wary. Well, I suppose you'd better come in. She led us into the sitting room, where my father sat watching football on the television, and Tessa and Ethan were glued to their phones. The room had been redecorated since my last visit. If you've been captivated by Clara's journey so far, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens when she finally confronts the family who tried to erase her. Her truth is just beginning to unfold. New furniture, fresh paint, and expensive-looking artwork adorned the walls. Richard, Lorna called, her voice falsely sweet. Clara's here about Elizabeth's will. My father glanced up, and I saw the precise moment his eyes flicked to Rachel Connor, standing beside me in her crisp navy suit, slim briefcase in hand. And who's this? He asked tightly. Rachel Connor, she said, extending her hand. I was Mrs. Elizabeth Harrington's attorney. Suddenly, everyone paid attention. Tessa lowered her phone. Ethan looked up from his game. Lorna quickly sat down, smoothing her hair. Well, Richard said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I suppose it's time to sort out Mum's affairs. I appreciate you coming all the way out here. Actually, Rachel replied coolly, I'm here for Clara. Silence settled over the room. I don't understand, Lorna said, her voice wary. Rachel set down her briefcase and pulled out a slim folder. I'm here to inform Claire about her inheritance from Elizabeth Harrington's estate. Her inheritance? My father's voice cracked. There must be some mistake. Clara isn't. Yono varish Clara. Misha wasn't really, Lorna said weakly. You tried to think so. She wasn't really what, Mr. Bennett? Rachel's voice was like a blade. She's adopted, Lorna blurted. Elizabeth wasn't her real grandmother. She had no reason to leave Clara anything. Rachel turned to me. Clara, would you like to tell them what you learned yesterday? Or shall I? I stood, my fingers brushing the letter in my pocket. Though my hands trembled, my voice was clear. I learned that I'm not adopted. Lorna made a choking sound, but I kept going. I learned that my mother was Sophie Harrington, and she died when I was 3. I learned that Lorna tried to convince my father to give me up for adoption, and the only reason they didn't was because Gran Elizabeth threatened to fight for custody. Lorna's face drained of color. Tessa and Ethan exchanged stunned glances. That's not true, Lorna stammered. That's impossible. And I also learned, I continued, that Gran Elizabeth left me her entire estate, the Beacon Hill townhouse, her investments, and $2,000,000 in cash. Silence fell. That can't be right, Richard whispered. She promised us. She said the estate would be divided equally among the grandchildren. She lied, I said simply. Just like you lied to me my whole life. Tessa spoke first. What about us? What did we get? Rachel checked her folder. Tessa and Ethan each received $4,000, 0 cents. $4,000, 0 cents? Ethan exploded. That's it? What about the house, the money? It all goes to Clara, Rachel said evenly. Lorna jumped up. This is ridiculous. We'll contest the will. Clara has no right to any of this money, Lorna cried. We're the ones who cared for Elizabeth. We're the ones who visited her, who helped her when she was ill. Actually, Rachel said calmly, Mrs. Harrington documented extensively that you and Richard prevented Clara from visiting her. She also recorded that your visits often involved asking for money. You're welcome to contest the will if you wish, Rachel continued. But I should warn you, Mrs. Harrington anticipated that. The will is ironclad, witnessed by multiple parties. She was also evaluated by 2 psychiatrists who confirmed her mental competency. A contest would be costly and futile. Richard slumped into his armchair, looking drained. Clara, you have to understand, he said weakly. We never meant for things to go this way. Didn't you? I shot back. Because from where I'm standing, it seems like you got exactly what you wanted. You erased the reminder of your first wife. You got to play perfect family with Lorna and your new kids. The only thing you didn't count on was Gran Elizabeth seeing through your act. We raised you, Lorna insisted desperately. We fed you, clothed you, gave you a roof. Doesn't that count for something? You did the bare minimum the law required, I replied, my voice trembling but firm. And you made sure I knew every single day that I wasn't wanted. I looked around at these people who'd shaped my childhood, who'd made me feel worthless and like a burden. The Jaguar, I said to my father. The kitchen renovation. Tessa's designer wardrobe. Ethan's holiday to Greece. How much did you spend thinking you'd inherit Gran's money? Richard wouldn't meet my eyes. About $160,000, 0 cents, Lorna whispered. Well, I said, standing, I guess you've figured it out. You're always telling people to figure things out. Rachel and I headed toward the door, but Tessa's voice stopped us. Clara, wait. You're not really going to keep everything, are you? I mean, we're still family. I turned back to look at her, sweet Tessa, who'd never once spoken up when Lorna tore me down. Tessa, who got designer clothes while I worked nights for a cheap coat. Family? I said softly. You mean like how you included me in family photos? Oh, wait, you didn't. Or how you invited me on holidays? No, you didn't do that either. Or maybe how you stood up for me when Lorna told everyone I was adopted? No, you didn't. But the money could help all of us, Ethan said. You could share it. We could all benefit. The money could help everyone, Ethan insisted. It's helping me, I replied firmly, because I'm the one Gran Elizabeth wanted to help. If you want money, get jobs, take out loans, figure it out. Rachel and I were nearly at the door when Lorna called out one last time. Clara, please. We made mistakes, but we're still your family. Doesn't that mean something? I paused, my hand on the doorknob. Richard is my father, I said quietly. Sophie was my mother. You're just the woman who married my dad and spent 20 years making me wish I'd never been born. We left them there, in their beautifully redecorated sitting room, surrounded by things they'd bought with money they never really had, facing the reality that their illusions had finally collapsed. 6 months later, I moved into Gran Elizabeth's Beacon Hill townhouse. It's beautiful, 4 bedrooms, high ceilings, sun streaming through tall windows, a spacious kitchen where she used to bake lemon cakes, and a garden bursting with roses she'd tended herself until the very end. I found photos there I'd never seen before, pictures of me as a baby in my mother Sophie's arms, family gatherings where I looked genuinely happy and loved. Proof of the life I might have had if my mother hadn't died so young. I also discovered more letters from Gran Elizabeth, carefully written but never sent, describing years of trying to stay in my life. Birthday cards she'd bought for me but was never allowed to deliver. Christmas gifts returned unopened. I finished my degree in business administration with a focus on finance. Thanks to Gran's money, I don't technically have to work, but I do anyway. I started a nonprofit to help young adults aging out of foster care, kids who know exactly what it's like to feel unwanted and alone. My father has called me only once since that day in Rachel's office. He asked if I'd consider helping them avoid losing their house. I told him to speak to my attorney if he wanted to discuss anything financial. Lorna sends me Christmas cards every year, filled with lines about forgiveness and moving forward. I throw them away, unopened. Tessa lost her designer lifestyle, unable to keep up payments without the inheritance she'd banked on. Ethan had to take a job to help their parents cover bills. They learned what I'd always known, that money doesn't just appear because you wish for it, and that actions carry consequences. But the best part isn't the money, as life-changing as it's been. The best part is the truth. For the first time in my life, I know who I am. I know that at least one person loved me unconditionally. I know my mother didn't abandon me, she was taken from me. I know that feeling out of place wasn't my fault. Sometimes I sit in Gran Elizabeth's garden, reading her letters, turning the pages of photo albums, feeling her presence around me. I feel the love she couldn't give me while alive, the relationship stolen by my father's weakness and Lorna's cruelty. I wish I could thank her in person. I wish I could tell her that her last gift wasn't just the money, it was the truth. And the truth, I've learned, is worth far more than $2 million, 0 cents. Though, admittedly, the $2 million, 0 cents doesn't hurt either. If my story moved you, subscribe and share your thoughts below. I'd love your support as I keep writing my own future. Remember, the truth is powerful, and you deserve yours too. Never let others define your worth. Stand tall, even when the world tries to push you down.